Hello, today we'll be looking at the second topic in Western political thought. Second thinker is Aristotle. In this video, we'll look at his political theories and understand what he is trying to say. So before that, let's look at who is Aristotle. He lived in Athens during the time 384 to 322 BC. He was a contemporary of Plato and he was also a student of Plato. He was a teacher of Alexander the Great and he is called as the father of political science. Now, an important thing to notice here is since he was teacher of a ruler, so he understood the practicalities of running a state, which was not the case with Plato. Another thing, he's called as father of political science. You will know that Plato is called father of political philosophy. Now, what's the difference here? Plato is more involved or more about ideas and theories and the normative aspect of it. Aristotle, on the other hand, is more about what is happening in reality, about what is the best form of state, which is practicable or which is possible. So he's more empirical in his approach, whereas Plato is normative is in his approach. He talks about philosophy of what should the state should be. He's more idealistic in his approach. Now let us look at the context and influence on Aristotle. In Aristotle's time, Athens was relatively stable. However, it has started to witness a decline of city states. In Plato's time, there was a war happening and there was conflict between classes, and democracy had also been established that executed Socrates. So we can see that how a writer's or a philosopher's context, the social and economic and the political conditions that exist during his time influence their political thought also. Another influence on Aristotle is Plato. Naturally, since he was his teacher, he learned a lot from Plato. However, he also turned his biggest critique. We will see that in following slides. Another influence and a major influence on Aristotle was his background in biology, his methodology of empiricism. Plato is a rationalist. What does that mean? That means that how did Plato arrive at his theory, or how did Plato know something? Plato's argument is that you can reflect in your own head, you can reflect and rationalize things and then arrive at conclusions. Aristotle, on the other hand, was an empiricist. Empiricist means he observed. He observed the surroundings around him, he observed the states around him, and he studied them, and then he arrived at a conclusion of which is best practicable state, or how should states be organized, what should different theories that he came about on. So this is an important difference between Plato and Aristotle. Plato is a rationalist and Aristotle is a empirist. So please keep this in mind. Another influence on Aristotle was sophists. We have heard about sophists even while studying Plato. Sophists were people who taught people in Athens how to argue or how to debate. They were teachers basically. Aristotle did not agree with their conclusions or did not agree with their theories, but he adopted their methodology of observing human behavior. Now we know that Aristotle was an empiricist. He believed in observation, he believed in classification of data that is observed and understanding or arriving at conclusions based on that. Similar methodology was adopted by sophists of observing human behavior. So Aristotle also was influenced by this. Now let us look at different ideas given by Aristotle. First is understanding characteristics of Aristotle. Aristotle was a pragmatic and a conservative thinker. That means he was a believed in progressive conservatism. Now it is important that you remember these words. These are key words and you use them while writing answer. Now there was an UPSC question Aristotle's critique of Plato's idealism. Now, in this question, your answer should begin describing Plato and Aristotle. If Plato was an idealist thinker, Aristotle was a pragmatic and conservative thinker. So, you're describing the nature of their political thought, the kind of nature they have adopted. So, if Aristotle is pragmatic, what does pragmatic means? He's practical. Plato, on the other hand, is very ideal. He is more focused on what should be. Aristotle is focused on what is. And he's conservative in the sense he advocated change, but very slow and gradual change. Plato, on the other hand, was a radical thinker. His theory of creating three classes, being ruled by a philosopher king, etc., is very radical. His ideas of education, communism, on family and property, that suggested overnight change, like how a ideal state should be or look like. On contrary, Aristotle is a very conservative thinker. According to Aristotle, the aim of political philosophy is to provide people general guide and rules of action. Here, the important thing is he's providing this to everyone. Plato's focus was his philosopher king. He should be aware of he is the one who will have real knowledge. He will be the one having knowledge of abstract ideas of what is justice, what is virtue, what is good, etc. But in this case, in Aristotle, you will see he's talking that it's the aim of political philosophy is that everyone is aware about general guide and rules that should be applied to their political action. The keyword here again being general, that they are not very specific, means he is advocating that the aim of political philosophy is that it provides a structure within which people are able to act, or their political action is guided by that structure, but they are not very specific rules ki you have to do X or you have to do Y and then only will something happen. No, it's very general in nature. His idea of political science is that it's not very theoretical but practical for people who do not reduce their lives to pure logic. Now, this is important. He admits that, ideally people should be rational all the time. However, this is not the case in real life. Human behavior does not display logic 100% of the time. So, his aim is that political science should not be theoretical, should not be idealistic, but rather practical. It should talk about issues or talk about theories that can be actually implemented in practical life. We have talked about this, that he believed in observation, his methodology of observation and empiricism. These are some keywords that must be there in your answer also, like empiricism, observation. This is a very famous image of Plato and Aristotle. This is Plato, this is Aristotle. Plato is like, if you see, he's pointing upwards towards celestial objects. So he is somebody who is always talking of abstract ideas, his world of being and becoming, and there's an element of metaphysics. On the other hand, Aristotle is like, let's stick to what's happening on this planet. Let's focus on how states are being actually run and what can be done to make them better or to improve their functioning. Now let us look at his theory of form. In Plato, we saw that his theory of form was the foundation of his political thought. Similarly, in Aristotle, that is also the case. First and foremost, he objected to Plato's theory of form. He said that there is no separation between a world of becoming versus world of being, which Plato had advocated. So he denied this separation of reality and idea, which Plato did, where he said, there's a constantly changing world of becoming and there's a stable world of being. Rather, he said that, the form. What is form? Form is an ideal state of something. So form is within matter. It is not separated from it. What is the relationship between form to matter? It is potentiality to actuality. What is actual right now is matter. what it will achieve is its potential. So what you are right now is matter. Your potential is that you will clear UPSC and become an IAS officer. That is your form. So matter is potentially develops to form. Form is it. So here you will see seed, which is matter, in itself contains a tree. When something achieves its full potential, that is called its form. Its current situation, its current reality is called matter. You are currently matter. You become an IAS officer, that would be a form. Form means the ideal or the potential that you achieve. Now this is a very important idea. This idea is fundamental to rest of his theories. So a question can be asked in UPSC that how theory of form in Aristotle forms the basis of his political thought, or forms the basis of his theory of citizenship, or forms the basis of his ideas on state. So it's important you understand the crux of this idea. Theory of form is when matter it goes from its actuality to potentiality. And actuality is what you are currently now, and potentiality is what you achieve, your ideal, your end stage you are able to achieve. So right now, if you are preparing for UPSC exam, you are matter right now, and when you're in actuality, and when you will be able to clear your exam and become an IAS officer, you would have achieved your potentiality. So that is form. Now what are the implications of these ideas? First, it contains the idea of development. Very important. He underlines the fact that the world is constantly changing. Things are always in a state of flux. They are always moving from their actuality to potentiality, and they develop to their perfection and completeness. And the key thing is that the matter carries within itself its true form, or its true purpose, or its true idealness. And another implication is study of science, teleological, or study of ends or purpose. So why do you study political science? The aim of political science is that it will tell you the goal or purpose of a state, of political activity. So this is very important. To know aim of something. When you know what is the aim of something, accordingly that you will be able to function. If you know the aim or end goal, your end goal is to clear UPSC and be an IAS officer, so the function you will have to perform is study. Right? You study, and the process of studying would involve that you read books, you test your knowledge after writing answers, etc., etc. So he says that is his idea of theory of form is crucial in this way, that it tells that everything can be looked from the lens of what is its end goal, and therefore what should be its function. On ethics and politics. Now we'll see how his theory of form is being played out in different ideas of his, and we'll also look at his views on different aspects. First, looking at his views on ethics and politics. Now he says, the purpose of ethics and politics is same. So basically they are two sides of the same coin. What is the purpose? It's good for men. This is a good with a capital G. Ethics will study good from the perspective of an individual. Politics will study the good from the perspective of whole community. And what is important here is Aristotle is focusing on studies through real people and their actual behavior. It is not an activity in abstract thinking. It is not an activity where you are, talking about, okay, ideally this is how people should behave. But rather he is talking about ethics and politics, and their aim is to study real people and their actual behavior to understand good for men. Now question is, what is good? Simple definition, that at which all things aim. end goal of everything is its good, which we studied in his theory of form also, which means whenever the end goal or achieving something's potential, you achieving your potential, that is the good. What is the aim of human beings? Happiness. Aim of every human being is happiness. Now happiness, this used by Aristotle, is very different from the modern concept of happiness given by utilitarian thinkers like Bentham and Mill. So do not make the mistake of confusing the two. When Aristotle says happiness, he means a completely different thing from when Bentham and Mill is talking about happiness. What is happiness? Happiness is a virtue. That is, to perform your functions well, and to perform it well, it must have rational basis or reasoned action. So if you are doing what you're supposed to do, if you're performing a function that you're supposed to do to achieve your form or achieve happiness, and that function is rooted in reason, then you will achieve happiness. That's what he's saying. Now you are preparing, you're studying to clear UPSC exam. Happiness is that you have, for Aristotle, happiness is not what you will get after you clear your exam. Rather, happiness would be that you perform your function. Your function is to study. It means that you read books, you are writing answers, you're improving yourself, and it is rooted in reason. You have rational basis whatever action you are taking. If you're studying and then you're writing an exam to evaluate yourself and then trying to improve yourself, it's all rooted in reason. So for Aristotle, that is happiness. You do or you perform your functions, what is required. You would have studied in ethics what is virtue ethics. So we become virtuous by practicing virtue. So if you keep studying, you keep performing a function that you are supposed to do, you are being virtuous. So that is what Aristotle means. Now let us look at his views on state. On state, Aristotle, before that, he goes on to explain that human beings are social and political animals. So it is very natural that they will form communities. So he divides communities at 3 levels. The first one is primary social unit. It is a household and a family. The aim of this unit is to maintain biological existence. So yours, needs of food, clothing, housing, reproduction, everything is taken care by at this level. Another thing, the husband is the head of the family. It is based on hierarchy and limited free choice. So it's a patrimonial household where husband is the head. He decides for the household and there's limited free choice for other members. It provides the necessities so heads have leisure for political activity. This is an important point. Since the needs are taken care of the husband or the head of the family by the rest of the household, the head is free to participate in the political sphere. Now the secondary social unit is the village, and final is state. So since humans are social and political animals, they will organize themselves. Aristotle says that it is a very natural thing to organize yourself. First, they will organize themselves in household, village, and finally state. Chronologically, state is coming at the final. But for Aristotle, it is prior to household and village. That is, it carries more weight, more relevance, and human beings will be able to experience freedom or true purpose of their living in a state. As you've seen in our last slide, purpose of human life is happiness. Happiness can be achieved through politics. Politics is what? When people go and participate in public sphere to formulate laws. So you have to understand this. So again, let's look at it again. State, highest form of organization. Again, when human beings achieve their potential, state comes into existence. It represents good. When state comes into existence, what will come into existence? Politics. Politics is not what we understand today. Politics is a good thing for Aristotle. Aim of politics is achieving happiness for whole community. You say, aim of ethics and politics inculcate virtue in citizens at higher level, happiness and virtue of the whole community. Now let us look at the characteristics of state as defined by Aristotle. It is a natural institution. This is very important. For Aristotle, it is imperative or it is inevitable that state will come into existence. It is something that occurs naturally because humans are social and political animals. Human beings go from actuality to potentiality, achieve their potential when state comes into existence. It is the end towards which people's social life ultimately aims, the goal of human life. State is prior to household and village. I have explained this. Like state has the most important function, the most relevant function for human life to attain happiness. What are the characteristics of state? There's free speech, there's equality of all citizens, and there is rule of law. It is very different from this that we have read in family, which is based on hierarchy and limited free choice. Another important point that I want to point out here is, for classical thinkers, state is natural. However, for modern political thinkers, state is a constructed institution. It's a historical institution. For Hobbes and Locke, state comes into existence after social contract. That is, people come together, they sign a contract, and then they create state. That is not the case with Aristotle. For Aristotle, state is a natural. It will come up naturally. It's as natural as people organizing themselves into families. People will eventually organize themselves into state. But for modern thinkers, it's a historical institution. It comes into existence at a given point of time in history. So this difference is very important, especially if there's a question that asks about, evolution on the ideas of state or theories of state. So you must mention this difference. Now let us look at Aristotle's classification of states. Again revising, aim of state, happiness of citizens by inculcating virtues. It is based on his theory of form. We have understood form is matter moving from actuality to potentiality. Now, what are the parameters he has chosen? Number of rulers, 1, 2, many, all, etc. Quality of rule, that is standard of justice. In good states, those that have achieved their potential, the rule would be done in favor, where the state is able to promote happiness, state is able to inculcate virtues. Based on this, he classifies 6 types of states. 3 are best and 3 are perverse forms of those 3 are the best ones. So best and worst. Monarchy, he says, is best. It is but theoretical and impossible to realize. It is in relation with Plato's philosopher king. Another best is aristocracy, that is again rule of few. Polity is rule of many. It is best practicable according to Aristotle. The perverse form of all these 3 is monarchy is tyranny when the rule is for vested interest. Similarly for oligarchy, and according to Aristotle, democracy is the worst. It was the same in Plato's case. He also said democracy is the worst form of government. Our focus is on polity. Aristotle says that polity is the best practicable form of government. Many participate in ruling, but under the constraint of law for public good. So what we understood, politics is when you try to find what is good for the whole community. What is good? Good is the aim, ultimate aim of things, or happiness of citizens. When everybody comes and participate in politics, everybody is equal, everybody has free speech. So if they come and participate, they come to deliberate, to formulate laws that will govern all. Then that is polity. So he says, it is a rule of middle class, balance between rich and poor class, midway of oligarchy and democracy. It realizes his another principle of golden mean is the golden rule. Aristotle is very clear in his ideas that we should try to find balance. Here, if you see in aristocracy, rich rules. So he says, when rich people will rule, they will rule in their favor. It will make the poor class worse off. So he tries to find a middle ground by creating a rule of middle class that is achieved in polity. It is balance between a rich and poor class. Another important reason for favoring polity is that it has the greatest scope of political action plus plurality. Plurality means there would be plurality of ideas. There would be reasoned debate happening, which I've told you, there's equal citizenship, there's freedom of speech, people come in public sphere, they debate and deliberate on laws, they pass the laws, and rule of law is established. Rule of law means equal applicability of all the laws on everybody. There is no one special. You would have seen that in Article 14, equality before law. A question has come in UPSC regarding this. Classification of states is central to Aristotle's political thought. Now, a lot of students, what they do is they focus on this classification. However, they forget to mention how it is central to his political thought. We will discuss that in the next part of the video. Now, let us look at his theory of property. Plato has envisioned communism of property. That nobody owns private property. However, as we know, Aristotle, he's a practical guy and he understands the utility or the functionality of property, and he understands that it is natural and it can lead to people's betterment if used appropriately. He has a very functional view. This is the key word here. He understands the function of property, how it helps people to attain good or happiness. He understands it's an ethical good, but political evil. What does it mean? That it is good for the individual. However, it may lead to some issues at a collective level. What are those issues? Of course, corruption, vices like avarice. People actually rule for their vested interest if property is involved. So we understand that it is an ethical good but political evil. Ethical good for individual, what is the utility or what's the functionality of property? It leads to motivation, self-respect, and opportunity of charity. So it is important that we understand Aristotle is in favor of private property. And we can compare this with Locke, who is also in favor of private property. However, there is a difference. Aristotle advocates or is in favor of private property because of its functional utility. That it leads to motivation, it leads to self-respect, it leads to people becoming more active, performing their functions well within the state. That it has some functional value, not because there is something inherent present in owning property. That is not the case. He says property has a functional value to play. That's why he is in support of private property. He understands that it is an ethical good but a political evil. On the other hand, for Locke, private property is an extension of the self. When he is talking about right to life, liberty and property, for Locke, property represents the self of an individual. The idea of self is extended to property itself. So very two different arguments. A question had been asked, I think, on this, that evolution of right to property. Or it may be asked that, how right to property from classical to modern political thought, how it has evolved. Or you can be asked to compare and contrast Aristotle's and Locke's views. They are very important. Both defend private property, however, for very different reasons. For Locke, it is not important that, property leads to inequality, which is the case for Aristotle. Aristotle agrees in principle that it leads to inequality and that it needs to be managed, where state can take contribution from the property class to take care of poor class. However, that is not the case in Locke. Locke does not even attribute to the fact that property leads to inequality. He says people who are good, who are industrious, will actually get property. People who are lazy or not hardworking, they will not have property. So for him it becomes about how the human nature is, how an individual is. The good, hardworking, industrious people will own property and the others will not. That is not the case with Aristotle. It is an important topic for your UPSC exam. Make sure that you write an answer for it. Now let us look at his theory of justice. For Plato, justice was, in ideal state, rule of philosopher king. But we know ideal state does not exist. So what is the best possible form? Polity. In that, justice is rule of law. Now what is law? Law is reason unaffected by passion. And further he goes on to say that justice and equality are interrelated. Justice as proportional equality. Now Aristotle is looking at distributive aspect of justice. Distributive aspect means distribution of resources, values, or rewards in society. How do we decide who should get what in a state? That is distributive justice. Aristotle says that you should be rewarded in proportion to your contribution. You contribute more, so you will get more reward. So now we'll see more in his theory of equality. He says it is unjust to treat equals unequally and unjust to treat unequals equally. Differential rewards based on merit. So he is an advocate of meritocracy. He would say, see, I have out of 100 marks, I have got 99, I should get in. Someone who gets 98 should get in. But someone who is not scoring well should not get admission in a school or a college or anything. That is his idea of meritocracy. He says, two people, how do you decide who should get what? Should be based on their performance, should be based on their contribution. Further, he says that inequality root cause of revolution. It is applied in this theory is applied in his theory of slavery. He gives a very formal conception of equality. Now, what is formal conception of equality? That you do not take into account the socio-economic aspect that goes on into deriving your merit. If I have studied in a very good school and a very good college and I had tuition classes at my disposal, obviously I was able to score 99. Now compare it to the student who could not get school uniform, who could not get admission to a good school, or who had violence happening at his home. Obviously that student will not be able to prepare so well and not be able to study well, and he will end up studying just assume 40-50% of the marks. But Aristotle says, well, you got 90 or 90 plus, so you deserve it, and 40 per person who did not get 40 to 50, who could not score well or got 40-50 marks will not get it. Simple idea, merit. That is formal conception of equality. He is not looking at, okay, how my merit came to be 90 is because other socio-economic factors contributed to it. That is not what Aristotle is considering. So very formal conception of equality. On revolution, Aristotle says, we understand that Aristotle has said inequality causes revolution, which is right, which we can see in modern times also. He's a conservative thinker. He's not in favor of sudden change, big change. He's a gradualist. So he is actually trying to see how to prevent revolution. So in that In that case, he is looking at what causes revolution. He says their causes will depend on type of state. Most common causes are inequality, corruption, influx of foreigners. If a question comes on this, make sure that you give an example from modern times. And the solution he has suggested is manage the feelings of inequality, real or imagined. It doesn't matter that people are unequal, or there's inequality in real sense or imagined sense. But if people perceive that they are being treated unfairly, in this case unfair means unequally, then they will revolt. Theory of citizenship. His theory of citizenship is again grounded in his theory of equality. First, let us look at this, what according to him is citizenship. It's a duty. It involves political action where people participate in the affairs of state. Who participate? The adult propertied males. Obviously, who are excluded then? Women, children, slaves, old and infirm. Why are they excluded? Because according to him, they are not rational. What is their duty? To participate in lawmaking, in deliberation. For Aristotle, you are only free. Your end goal of happiness that he's talking about, from his theory of form, you achieve your potential, you achieve your true freedom if you participate in political sphere. Something is called civic republicanism. This idea is this, which is also used by Hannah Arendt in modern political thought. This is an important idea, often asked in varying ways, where they talk about Hannah Arendt, or they talk about Aristotle, or they talk about classical ideas that are still relevant in modern times. This is one of those ideas. Bookmark this. Following from this is his theory of slaves. It is derived from his theory of equality. Human beings are naturally unequal according to Aristotle. This is a very key idea. In modern times, if you see United Nations Human Development Report, which defines human rights, it says all men are born equal. Everybody is natural. There's natural equality. We see it from Hobbes and Locke also, that human beings are naturally equal. Everybody has an equal right to life. Everybody is to be treated equally. But Aristotle says differently, that people are naturally unequal. What he means? That some are intellectually strong, others are physically strong. So he says people who are intellectually strong who should become masters. People who are physically strong and lack rational capacity to take decisions should be made slaves. Intellectually strong masters, whereas physically strong should be slaves. A very functional logic. His theory of form again. What function can you perform at the best? If you can perform the function, you have the intellect, you be the master. If you have the physical strength, you can perform physical functions better, you are a slave. So for him, slavery is natural and it is also useful. It allows masters the leisure time for participation in political sphere. Another thing is that he looks at slaves at how do slaves comes into existence. One is natural that we talked about. One is by law. So if one state attacks the other state and it loses, so the people of that state become political prisoners and they are turned into slaves. But one important aspect of his theory of slaves is where it shows that he is pragmatic and progressive in his views. If slaves develop rational capacities and virtues, they should be freed by masters. That shows his pragmatic thinker. Of course, critique, you will say that in modern times every natural equality is believed. Another important aspect is intellect and physical strength. To an extent, they are determined by socio-economic conditions. My intellect will obviously develop if I'm studying in a good educational institution, if I'm getting nutrition, if I'm getting healthy food, and my health is being taken care of. If my house, there's there's calm and there's peace and I'm given time to study. Compare it with somebody who has to go out and fight in street for just to, fill their stomachs. So intellect will develop quite differently for two people placed in such different situation. So the background that goes on in preparing someone's intellect is overlooked by Aristotle. So that is your critique, evaluation and conclusion of this thing. We have seen he's called as father of political science. His focus is on what's possible. It's a very comprehensive work. It touches all aspects of human life from state to individual. Empiricism, he uses the methodology of empiricism. Civic republicanism, he establishes the importance of participation and deliberation in political sphere. Rule of law, golden mean is golden rule. So these are important ideas of Aristotle. So if you are asked, analyze Aristotle as a political thinker, or analyze, the crux of his political thought. So these are the key ideas. What is his critique? That we have seen: formal conception of equality, his justification of slavery, his exclusion of women from citizenship. And then we see, another important aspect is Aristotle's critique of Plato's idealism. We have seen on all three grounds what Aristotle has said, how he has criticized Plato's ideas. Another important thing that I want to point out here is that when you are studying for PSIR, ensure that you have a basic understanding of all the ideas discussed in this video. However, do not delve into too much depth. That is not required from your exam's point of view. You will lose your precious time and energy in trying to going in too much depth. Only study what is required. From Aristotle's, if you can learn something that is functional, take a very functional view of it. What is required to score well? That you have basic understanding of the topic. You have conceptual clarity. What would mean? You understand why something is being said. What is being said, first of all, why it is being said, and what is the implication of what is being said. Implication. So have that conceptual clarity and you would be good to go. You will be able to write answers from 150 to 250 words. So all the best. Thank you.